Ladies and gentle beings, welcome to Memes Testing, where I play games wrong and see if they're still completable. Today I'll be plowing through the lands between as I attempt to find out if it's possible to beat Elden Ring without the B button. But why the B button? Well, dear listener, this is because the entirety of Elden Ring's combat is based around dodging. And this button is the source of all dodging and sprinting in this game. So not only was this run painful, as I was railed by a train of easily dodgeable attacks, but I also had to spend the entire time walking at a snail's pace through this open world game. This game is thankfully structured unlike any other Soulsborne Ring Hero game, as from the get-go we can attempt almost the entire first half of the game in any order we wish. And this is great because if we attempt morgott with our starting gear, we'll sadly not be of passing skill. We start the game as Old Lady Bingus, as we only have one thing on our mind: falling off this cliff to skip the tutorial fight, because we cannot possibly win it without dodging. And then we spend the next 10 minutes slowly walking over to collect Best Girl from this homeless lady who can no longer care for them anymore. This is Torrent, and they are the only saving grace in this god-awful idea, and the reason I have been able to complete this challenge in under a week, as while we will only be walking with them, as the B button has been unbound from the controller, they still walk at over double our standard walking speed, so we can possibly be done with Limgrave before Saturday. So we proceed to grab anything that is not nailed down, and then send this disabled mother of 5 to the Shadow Realm to get some easy levels without even thinking about the B button. The main things we grab are the two halves of the Dectus and Medallion to allow us to access the upper half of the starting map, our primary weapon, Great Stars, a large mace that allows us to heal a tiny amount on every hit, Praying Strikes, an Ash of War that allows us to heal a large amount if it hits, as well as providing the most important thing in this game, Hyper Armor, which can allow us to tank certain hits as long as they are not too big. And we also move over to the War Master Shack to grab the thickest armor anyone can find on the ground. And yes, we found it on the ground, don't ask where the War Master went. Our plan so far is just to become thick enough to actually survive a hit and then punish with Praying Strikes to attempt to outlast each boss. But our HP and FP are limited. This should be possible to start with, but we're going to need to pick our opportunities carefully, as we can barely avoid certain attacks by circling round or jumping, but this isn't always going to be the case. Our first main boss, outside of the Crystallian that was holding the first bell bearing, is going to be morgott. This is going to be an interesting way to benchmark what we're going to be working with, and how many tricks we will need to pull out of our bag in order to proceed. As ideally, I would like to do this without blocking with shields, as that just turns this into a stamina management game, and I'd also preferably like to do it without Spirit Ashes. Anyway, enough preamble. We move on to the morgott fight. This actually took longer than I was expecting. I really thought that we'd be able to poise through most of his attacks. However, this was not the case unless we were using the hyper armor from Praying Strikes. We did manage to get this done within 5 tries, which was both more and less than I was expecting. More than I thought after the initial fight went so poorly, but much less than I was assuming overall, as we definitely ran around quite a bit to prepare for this encounter. Looks like we're going to have a rough ride ahead of us. Afterwards, of course, we move on to Stormveil Castle proper, and at this point we're going to completely ignore the safe way around and take the front gate, which at the best of times is a pain, but without dodging is going to be interesting. one thing I noticed that went pretty well on my first attempt was the tracking on the ballista that was shooting us. It was fairly accurate, unless we were jumping. We also had a handful of failed attempts due to the exploding ballista in the second section during the stairs, but after only 2 attempts, we did make it past, and were able to make it right up to the bonfire before Godric, mere minutes after Margit was defeated. Personally, on a normal run, I would actually rate Godric a fair bit easier than Margit, but in this case he does have a lot more moves that can knock us down, and that's gonna be quite a bit of a headache. Phase 2 also brings us a new issue, grab attacks. This is going to completely destroy us in this game, as we cannot dodge, we have no real method of avoiding these, and if it touches us at any point during the animation, it's going to go off. And they almost always deal at least half of our health. But after only 2 attempts and a stop off to the Rea Lucaria swamp to go get the Blood Flame weapon buff, we get a fairly nice cycle on phase 1, and we end up taking him down in phase 2 with a few well-placed praying strikes and a counter for a glorious finish. Next we move on to Liurne of the Lakes and up to Rea Lucaria. Just a quick trot north through the swamp and we can get to the bonfire in front of the magical gate. We can jump directly off this pillar and then jump immediately as we hit it to the ground. At this point we can run around the west side and pick up the glintstone key while ignoring this dragon, and teleport our way back to the bonfire we picked up earlier for an easy way into the academy. This has always been my preferred way of doing it. You could get the key first and then just walk up normally, but honestly I like having the teleport, and the jump can be fun when it works. Before heading in, I decided to spend my bounty of dragon hearts that were donated to me by an unknown source and pick up a few utility spells that can help us through the run. Mainly Bad Breath for the infliction of rot, and the Frostbite one, which I think I used? Maybe? Anyway, these are going to be our main damaging spells for most of the run, as this allows us to inflict high damage status effects on enemies and generally try and outlast them through attrition rather than directly chipping them down. Now with some much more potent magic, I head off to the off-brand Hogwarts, and the first section terrified me. Usually you would just run up the stairs to these guys and end them. However, our knees have been fused, and we cannot move faster than an ailing turtle. While we did get past this section, and I was on the fence if this was going to be possible with our current health, during those brief seconds, as I had a glimpse of what was to come before me, I realized that mages in this game are going to be a problem. The rest of the run up to the academy proper was honestly painless, as we just made ourselves silent and walked past everything. Even the heavy hitters and the scholars reading in the corner paid us no nevermind, while we strolled past on the way to the Big Red Dug. Speaking of which, I almost forgot to include them in this video, as the fight itself lasted about 14 seconds, and honestly, this is the best experience we're going to have for quite some time. We can surprisingly make it up to Renala, as we just have to jump here and walk past walk past the falling ball without being hit, as we proceed on as usual and move to the ankle biters. Phase 1 is, well, as it's always been, as we hit 3 of the singing crawlers and then when she falls down, we beat her within an inch of her life until her daughter decides to take over. This is where we hit problems. Mainly because this is a mage fight, and as soon as the fight starts, she starts charging a Comet Azure, one of the single most powerful sorceries in the game, and we basically have to take a hit for this. This, along with the large amount of tracking spells and the ability to summon to make this a 2v1, makes this indefinitely harder than anything we've had to fight so far. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I may go do the Radahn festival instead of Renala. I don't think I've ever done that for my second Great Rune. Before Radahn, I decide to go get a couple of free souls and head up to the capital in order to kill the Dragon Knight guarding the side entrance. This, in theory, shouldn't be too hard, as we can inflict rot, get on torrent, and run in circles. And there lies the issue. We can't run. In my mind, this seemed like the easiest thing in the world, as if we just outpace the Dragon Knight, we win. The rot will take them. But after a couple failed attempts at trying the fight normally, I decided to pull another wedge from my cheese bag, and as this guy has the absolute worst vision in the game, we make ourselves silent, creep around behind him, and apply poison. This works opposed to the rot, as bad breath deals damage along with a status effect. This poison mist deals no damage, and for some reason the AI doesn't seem to care that it's being poisoned to death. So, after the Dragon Knight goes down to some gas station sushi, we collect our payment and make our way into the capital proper. At this point, I forgot that you actually need the 2 Great Runes to get into the capital, and at this point, I just take the fast travel point, as we can just come back later once I've done Radahn. And while I'm actually up here, I decided to run on over to the Volcano Manor to start up their questline, because the highest poise armor in this game is actually locked behind Patch's side quest. Additionally, while I'm up here, I decided to go unlock the Mogwin Palace to Vare's questline. After we die 3 times to this random NPC, we have the option to go collect the blood of a maiden for Vare. Now usually this can be quite a bit of a pain, but we literally have the option of taking the blood from a blind child. Honestly, I'll take the easy win where I can find it. Before we head on over to Radahn, we actually move on over to the local Albinoric sleepover to get some free runes, and at this point, I think I'm going to summon for the festival. It's not necessarily a Spirit Ash, but you can't use those in this area anyway, and by design, they are supposed to be used in this fight. So, again, I'll take the free win when I can get it. We summon whoever isn't nailed down while attempting to use the refuse in the area to block Radahn's shots, jump around those that we cannot, scrape off on some of the arena, and then wait while jumping around like a mad person for the NPCs to reach Radahn and start the melee phase of this fight. At this point, we canter on over and apply some lore-friendly rotting to this unfortunate man and his horse. Afterwards, we smash in for a few attempted bleeds, and by the time he rockets off and lands, the rot has already taken him. Before we make it into the capital, we level up a few times at the sleepover and put on the bullgoat armor from Patch's quest, as we have now become a brick wall. As long as that wall is made of those fake rubber bricks, because poison this game just doesn't do anything. Dark Souls 3 really has left its mark on this series now, hasn't it? But we do have one thing going for us, and we may as well have the best armor that we can. Now we've made it up to the capital, and we can take a stroll along the rooftops and saunter up this big old dragon to meet up with Ghost Dad. And after a few very close calls, we decide to move on in and show him how a praying strike works until that sickly glow he has fades away. Thought this was going to be one of the harder fights since he is immune to every single status effect, including bleed. But if you have enough pressure, you can pray down just about any problem. Now we have another familiar face in Morgott, but this time we are rock solid, and come bearing both Rot and his old bracelet. This is going to make him take a knee during phase 1, and with a well-timed bleed proc and the ongoing Rot, phase 2 happens at a much lower health than usual, and as we become the Angry Boy's chew toy for the next 20 seconds, the Rot is going to slowly chip him down until the big guy is basically begging to be put out of his misery. Oh, we sit here with quite a bit of health to spare. Afterwards, we get rejected by a tree, and then that homeless lady comes back to give us a medal as we reach the mountaintops of the giants. One less than safe stroll over the precarious cliffs and dragon-filled frozen lakes, and we reach the part of our story that gets a little bit sad. On the way to the kiln, Bingus made someone mad. The fire giant guarding the kiln is the hardest and largest boss that we have had to deal with up until this point. I have 4 straight hours of footage of me attempting to learn how to fight this colossal pain without dodging, and it almost broke me. But you see that there? I'll slow it down for you. This right there? There are iframes when you get off aggro, torrent. This was my ticket to possibly being able to win this fight without being able to run with torrent or roll through his attacks. We are barely able to last more than 20 seconds in each attempt. But over these 4 hours, I built a game plan. Step 1 is to get to the giant without dying. Step 2 is to rot his weak leg, and if done right, we can rot him and then get in a few swings when he freaks out. From here, we'll be able to use Torrent and the Crystalline Bubble tier to attempt to safely pick away at his health until we get into the second phase. From here, we reapply the Rot and then immediately walk away on Torrent. This is where we use one of those skills we picked up in Mogwin Palace, Swarm of Flies. This is usually a fairly worthless spell, but it allows us to attempt to get a bleed proc while evading on Torrent from a range. After some time of trying to do this, and peel off a number of the ranged attacks on these trees, we do it. We finally beat that. Oh, whatever, it still counts. We ride Best Girl back up to the kiln to get our souls, and then the homeless lady commits arson on a tree. I'm not going to ask questions. However, we do pass out from the smoke and wake up in a floating city covered in dragons. What kind of tree was she burning? Anyway, we wander up through the halls towards the point in the game which I thought would be the worst. The Godskin thruple. I know it says duo, but for some ungodly reason, the devs decided to make the health bar about 2.5 times what a Godskin would be. So until further notice, thruple. This boss gave me the single most problems on my first ever run, because having to manage 2 bosses at the same time is a completely different skill set than normal. And with our restrictions, we're going to have to find an alternate way to do this. Luckily, these idiots are stupidly weak to sleep, a status effect I did not know existed until about my 4th playthrough of this game, when someone asked me if I had any sleep pots, and, well, now I know it exists, and it basically makes this boss a cakewalk on any normal run. But without being able to dodge, I didn't think this would hold true. But it turns out, rot damage doesn't break sleep. So after putting them to sleep, infecting the duo, and then setting one rotted boy to sleep while I duel his partner, we manage to beat the living daylights out of them, and then proceed to do the same to the other. At this point, we take out the third without any issues, as it is now a 1v1, and mopping up is basically free. I did not expect that to go as well as it did, but it only took 2 attempts. I am legitimately confused. One quick and surprisingly safe stroll down Bird and Lightning Lane, and we make it to the bridge before Malekith. We find yet another Dragon Knight, and you better believe I'm taking another wedge out of that bag, as we are going to rot them, hide, wait, and repeat. This will make the, numerous runs ahead go a little bit smoother, as they do not respawn, thankfully. Malekith is next, and I knew Phase 1 would be possible. It's simply just a joke compared to every other fight that we've gone through in the past hour or so, but Phase 2 could be a contender for the hardest mandatory boss fight in this game on a normal run, and it is entirely a mobility-based fight like the Fire Giant, but this time we don't have Torrent to protect us. Each attempt went the same way: pre-buff, run in, rot them, and play ring around the pillar with the old guy. But as soon as he hit Phase 2 and activated Daddy mode, the fight became overbearing. Everything was stacked against us. He is multitudes faster, could outreach and outmaneuver us with ease. He deals both flat, percentage, and debuff based damage in a single attack, and his attack arcs cover more area than I could walk in the time it takes him to make them. And worst of all, he looked good while doing it. It was a disaster for many runs, until I abandoned all thought of trying to chip him down, and decided I would dominate him physically, just by providing unyielding pressure and not backing down. In the end, I decided that Lion's Claw was the right choice, as it has hyper armor to get through his hits, tracking to account for the movement, and it has a small amount of movement built in to help us correct for gaps that Malekith can easily create. With the Death Daddy done, we can move on to the capital of Ash and the final 2 bosses of the game. The Gideon fight went about as well as everyone expects, as I will only leave him here as a footnote, as he may know everything, but it ain't worth much when I crack your skull and then set you on fire. Godfrey is up next, and after dealing with the status immune version of him earlier, with only minor setbacks, I figured that this version that I could rot and then chip down would be cake. but I'd forgotten about how oppressive Phase 2 can be. That seems to be a pattern with many of the bosses I've fought so far, as when they gain any level of mobility or range over me, it becomes 100 times harder to deal with. Horaloo is ridiculous, and without a doubt the single fastest boss so far. Malekith had verticality and range, but this guy is all speed, and he has to have at least twice the health pool of Malekith. For this, I pulled out some of the previous tricks again, and decided to let him have a little nap mid-fight. But this didn't work. He just fell asleep and then continued fighting. It looks like the rot while sleeping is not something that applies to everyone, sadly. Afterwards, I decide to attempt to rot him and then kite him around the arena, but overall I decided to just break down and farm more HP and damage, because this is ridiculous. I just... He treats me like a chew toy. It's nonsense. In the end, after all of the testing, it did just come down to spamming Lion Claw, and then tanking every single thing that came our way, and hoping for good RNG on the stagger. Honestly, I'm just glad this fight is over. This is where we reach that tree that rejected us before, and we can meet the final boss, Radahn, and the Elden Beast. Fresh off my previous high from Horaloo, I thought I was going to clean this up with some Lion Claw spamming, call it a day, and have this ready by Thursday. Oh, what a fool I was. At this point I am tanky as hell and can regenerate my health by attacking and passively over time. Radahn means nothing to a solid spam of Lion Claws, and after they went down, I swapped over to an upgraded Malekith's Black Blade to burn down the beast with percentage health damage, and for lore reasons I thought this would be an awesome finisher, but I underestimated this big sack of stars, as I'm pretty sure I've never actually had to take more than 1 or 2 cracks at the beast, opposed to Radahn, as Radahn is definitely the harder of the two once you get the beast's moveset down. But I failed to account for the sheer distance this fight incorporates into itself, with the beast constantly moving to the next postal code, and I have to spend 2 to 3 business days walking on over to try and hit it, only for it to run away yet again, and then I have to repeat the process because I'm so damn slow. After a solid 10 attempts of getting to the beast with next to no issues, and then just being too slow or being chipped down by its ranged attacks, I had to break down and do one final round of farming to become the single thickest person in all the lands between. So I spent the next few hours having a sleepover with the Albinaurics, and at this point level increases have become ridiculous. And then I went out and obtained my final build of talismans. We completed Alexander's questline and moved him to Faramazula, only to shatter him and his dreams to get his shard for 15% more damage for our weapon art. We picked up the +2 Haligdrake talisman for 20% reduced holy damage, and the Dragon Crest Great Shield talisman for another 20% damage negation. And finally, the cherry on top of our damage negation sundae is the Ritual Shield talisman for a whopping 30% damage negation while we're at full health. And in theory, we should always be near full health with this massive defense, as we regenerate health constantly and while we're attacking. I was prepared to meander after this beast for an hour if it meant that I could say this was possible. And after a few attempts of slowly meandering after this giant idiot, I failed. The chip damage was just too much. And no matter what I did, I could only slowly wander after it. Even with the most damage negation I could muster, the chip damage against me would just be too much, and it would kill me before I could kill the beast. I swapped weapons. I used a shield to get extra HP regeneration. But in the end, I just did not have enough to survive. Even the cleanest of Radahn attempts, where I had as many flasks as possible, I would still lose the battle of attrition. That was it. I ran out of steam. I shelved this for the night and hope to try fresh in the morning. But while I was laying down for the night, I was thinking of other weapons that I could use for this. Maybe take a bow and ping it down. All status effects were out of the question, so it would have to be chip damage. And then it hit me. The solution has beaten me over the head multiple times. Well, at least it was 2 days prior. Magnus the Beast Claw, the fool that I invaded to complete Vari's questline the lazy way, used the exact same weapon as me. If I ended him, could I obtain a second one? Could I apply so much pressure and self-healing that this became possible? Yes! Yes, I can. This idiot had the key all along, as each hit of this weapon will give a set amount of HP back, and this applies to both. So if we power stance them, we can double the amount, and while it's not a lot, it does help us keep that 30% damage negation much longer than normal in this beast fight. I also decided that as a final stroll to the finish line, I broke out the use of Great Runes, which, thanks to Morgott, gives us 30% more health, and with that I can confidently say it is possible to beat Elden Ring without using the B button at all. However, I would in no way recommend this to any single person, as what should be the simplest of fights will become a puzzle game of stupid proportions. Or you could just summon a distraction and spam Comet Azure to one-shot all the bosses without using the B button, but that robs the run of all fun. And I'm glad I was able to do this without any Spirit Ashes, because I'm pretty sure Tish can just solo all of these bosses if she gets a good enough distraction. This was absolutely horrendous to attempt to do within a week, but I enjoyed almost every single minute of it. And I think next week I'll be trying something that doesn't take a few dozen hours just to get footage for. I'm going to go lay down, as I think I deserve a rest after this nonsense. If you're still here, I do appreciate your time, and if you think it was well spent, a like or subscribe goes a long way to letting me know. If you have any suggestions for other challenges, do let me know in the comments, and I'll see you when we do the next thing.